Conor McGregor, he taps out to Nate Diaz. Same fate for Holly Holm against Miesha Tate. So what does the future hold for those two, and what does that mean for Ronda Rousey, who, of course, many people thought would slide in there and take on Holly Holm? She's already defeated Miesha Tate not once, but twice, Dave Sholler. So it seems that your organization has a conundrum here. Thanks for joining me, pal.
You say conundrum, and I say I'm sitting here in Las Vegas, fresh off the biggest and best event in UFC history across the board. And, I read some takes on Twitter and on social media that having two big stars like that lose was a huge blow to our sport. In reality, as you were starting to articulate, it creates a tremendous opportunity. I mean, Miesha Tate now with the potential to, whether it's fight Ronda Rousey or rematch Holly Holm, Conor McGregor going back to 145 pounds to potentially fight New Jersey's own Frankie Edgar, the former champion, Jose Aldo. It was a sign, Mike, of why this sport has become so popular. You know, sometimes when you see the point spread in a game or whatever it may be, you can predict a blowout. But in our sport, like I told you on this very show Friday, one punch, one kick, one submission can change it all. And if 196 didn't prove that, I don't know what will.
What was more surprising? Which of the two was more surprising? You're there, you're watching it. Which let the air out of the building more? Which had the fans in attendance more awestruck?
Well, listen, I think Nate Diaz is so polarizing, and Conor McGregor has become such an international superstar that was the loudest I've ever heard a UFC arena. Hands down. The closest I ever saw to that was when Cain Velasquez beat Brock Lesnar in California, when I thought the arena was going to fall apart with that much noise. But I think when you look at the stats and see Miesha Tate down on the scorecards in round 5, needing a finish, Mike. She needed a finish to win that fight. She was getting dominated in the striking, but every chance she got to secure a takedown, she made the fight dirty and unpredictable, like we said on Friday that she would need to do. So to see that late in the fight, to get the takedown, to get the choke, and put Holly out cold, that to me was probably the most surprising outcome.
All right, Dave Sholler is the Vice President of Public Relations for the UFC. Tate beats Holm in the 5th round. Does that set up a rematch for Tate against Ronda Rousey? Is that the next fight for her?
It's the number one question in our sport right now, and I can tell you tomorrow we'll get back together. We always do a Tuesday morning post-mortem, if you will, and we also have our fight-making meeting that day. There's a couple of interesting scenarios. Does Miesha want to wait for Ronda to return? Ronda has talked about coming back in either October or November. Does she want to try to fight at UFC 200, which would potentially open up the door for a rematch for Holm? I think a lot of that will be sorted out this week. And like I said at the top, this poses some really, really interesting scenarios, and if you're a UFC fan, this year is going to be pretty wild.
So what does this do for Holm now? I mean, does she just kind of sit and wait for the winner of that match and say, well, I get the rematch against Miesha if she wins, and then, of course, Ronda would probably want an opportunity to get a rematch against Holm. So does that keep her relative, do you think?
Oh, I think Holly is obviously still an incredible superstar for our sport. What people don't realize is this is the most accomplished women's combat sports athlete in history. Whether you talk about kickboxing, she was the 2-time Ring Magazine Boxer of the Year in the women's divisions, and now obviously a UFC champion, former UFC champion. She's still incredibly relevant, and I think you have an interesting trifecta of Holm, Rousey, and now Tate. And I mentioned to you guys on Friday as well, Mike, keep an eye on Amanda Nunes, who was very dominant in her performance in the first fight on the main card on Saturday night. So, a couple of years ago, people were wondering if there was any depth to the women's 135-pound division. I think we answered that question on Saturday night. What I'm interested in, Mike, and knowing that you've been a fight fan for a long time, is what would you do if you were in our shoes in Las Vegas today?
Well, I tell you, I was talking about this last night, and I'm not sure because, some people have said that Tate was a bad matchup for Holly Holm, but, she's more of a grappler, as is Ronda, and Holm didn't seem to have a problem there because she didn't allow Ronda to wrestle with her. She got to her first. So I'm not sure, Tate and and Ronda have similar styles. I think Ronda's just better at what she does than Miesha is at what she does. So I'm not so sure I think Miesha Tate would win a third match between those two.
That's a fair point, and I think the fair point there is Ronda, because she was so dominant, was starting to fight athletes in their style of fighting. So she'd wrestle a wrestler, grapple a grappler, strike with a striker, and the Holm fight was the first time in her pro career where Ronda tried to strike with a striker, and it didn't pan out. But I'll tell you what, with UFC 200 on the horizon in July, I can't remember a more exciting time in our sport where you just don't know what's going to happen, whether it's today, tomorrow, or next week. It's a wide open sport, and I think that's why Saturday night is going to go down in the history books as one of our most successful, if not our most successful event of all time.
Well, Dave, then, you asked me what I would do. As I'm thinking about it here, I might in July have Tate and Holm go again, and if Ronda's not ready until the fall, I'd say the winner, you guys go again, and the winner, because Holm probably deserves a rematch. She said she wants to fight her tomorrow. All right, you guys want to fight tomorrow? You go in July. And then the winner of that gets to go Rousey. Because Tate has lost twice to Rousey, I think that makes that fair.
You know, it doesn't sound unfair to me, and that's why we wait that extra day to have that meeting on Tuesday, just to kind of let everything sink in and start having the conversations. It doesn't sound like a bad idea. I think you'll start to get some clarity here over the next 10 to 14 days. But that's what I was saying, Mike. This is such a fun division right now at 135 for the women. There's rising contenders. You got a champion coming back. You got a champion that just fell. And you got Miesha Tate. You got to remember, Miesha Tate was somebody less than a year ago that was openly pondering retirement. And here she comes back, rejuvenated, had a great camp here in Las Vegas. And there were points in the fight on Saturday where you thought, man, can she get over the hump? Is she going to be that athlete that just can't win the big one? And then, boom, round 5, she secures the takedown and puts Holly out cold. It was one of the most dramatic wins I've ever seen.
Dave Sholler is the Vice President of Public Relations for UFC. It was UFC 196. I was watching it at a packed house, man. It was mobbed where I was, and the place was going berserk. Nate Diaz, I guess a stunner. I mean, he and look, keep in mind, this guy's an interesting story. He wins the Ultimate Fighter 5. I mean, and McGregor, I don't know if he was kind of taking him like he was, I don't want to say a joke or anything, but he was kind of almost like taking it like, I got this. And I don't know. I mean, were you as stunned as it seemed like everybody is?
Well, listen, I get why everyone is
by the way, Dave, not to mention, Diaz takes this on a very short notice.
Is he not one of the toughest human beings you've ever seen, though? He was getting hit with shots in that first round that would have put anybody out. But Nate Diaz is just so damn tough, Mike Gill. And that's what's made him one of the biggest, most polarizing stars in this sport. Am I surprised that he won the fight? No, because I knew if the fight hit the floor, a Cesar Gracie, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, someone that's been invested in the grappling game for a long, long time, he and his brother Nick, I'm not surprised that was the outcome when it went to the ground. But early in that first round, it just did not look like he could find a rhythm. And he said in the post-fight press conference that he knew he needed a round. He needed a round to get his bearings, and he needed a round for his confidence to say, hey, I can do this on short notice. It was one of the craziest moments I've ever seen. When that fight hit the floor, how smoothly he transitioned to take Connor's back, flatten him out, and sink in the choke. I mean, that's just textbook Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And, one of the things that I think is not getting enough talk about today, Mike, is the fact that Conor McGregor moved up 20-something pounds to fight at welterweight, to fight a guy who's been one of the longest reigning 9+ years in the sport, tough guys. A lot of people will say he talked his talk and didn't deliver, but if you don't respect what Conor McGregor did on Saturday night, stepping in there, he could have easily, when Rafael Dos Anjos pulled out of the fight, he could have easily said, guys, I'm going to sit on the shelf. But he knew he wanted to make that investment and prove to his fans that he'll fight anyone, anytime, any place. He did that on Saturday. But a big, big star was born. Nate Diaz transcended the MMA community on Saturday night, and everyone who somebody's talking about him today.
And Cormier, excuse me, we'll get to Cormier in a minute, but McGregor handled it very well. He was very good afterwards in the press conferences. He said everything and said, look, I mean, he ate his humble pie for the most part. You got to give him credit for that. So, Dave Sholler, give us the maps for these two gentlemen. What's next?
Well, Nate Diaz, it's wide open for him. Does he stay at 170 pounds? Does he go back to 155 pounds? Does he fight Rafael Dos Anjos? There's been talk about him challenging Robbie Lawler. I think we sit down tomorrow and start figuring that out. I think Nate, quite honestly, Mike, needs to figure out what he wants to do next as well. But I would imagine that whatever he does next is going to be a highly anticipated fight. And Conor McGregor, candidly said at the post-fight press conference he wants to go back to 45. It's a tough weight cut for him, but if I had a crystal ball, I would say he goes back to 45, and if he can successfully defend his title, he'll then want to go back up to 55 and challenge for the title as was originally intended at UFC 196. But the doors are wide open. There's an air of just excitement in the office here in Las Vegas today. People are fired up, and never say never in this thing, Mike. Never say never.
All right, and Cormier, John Jones, those two guys, I don't think they like each other very much. We probably will see you in the middle of another picture breaking those two guys up. But tell us a little bit about what's going down in April with those two.
Well, it's funny because Jake from State Farm just called, and I just upped my personal life insurance. April 23rd from the MGM Grand Garden Arena, the rivalry will be settled. We had a press conference on Friday that was just incredible, and I encourage all of your listeners to go to UFC.com and watch that again. These two do not like each other. This isn't just about the belt now, Mike. This is personal. John Jones, who was stripped of the title last year for some of his out-of-the-octagon incidents that had taken place, he's replaced by Daniel Cormier, one of his bitter rivals, and now they're going to settle the score April 23rd. There is legitimately no love lost. Backstage for the entire weekend was a big challenge, just keeping those two apart. It's not that they're not professionals. They're not going to get in a full-on fist fight backstage, but they just don't like being around each other. And a fight that's flying under the radar is, in my eyes, number 1 or 2 in the pound-for-pound rankings, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. He's our flyweight champion, taking on former Olympic gold medalist wrestler Henry Cejudo. That's the co-main event. Anthony Pettis returns on that card April 23rd. It might, and I'm just going to take a shot in the dark here, Mike, it might be a great chance for Mike Gill and the entire 97.3 ESPN team to come on out to Vegas. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I'll tell you, that would be fantastic, and I'm looking forward to that. And the July 9th opportunity for UFC 200 in Vegas, where I guess we could see McGregor back in action and Nate Diaz on that date. So, and possibly Miesha and Holly Holm too. So that should be a fantastic couple of events coming up for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, and what people don't realize is that is our big, we call it UFC International Fight Week. We have 3 fights on 3 nights. We do a fight Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. There'll be 3 title fights across those 3 days. The Fan Expo, where you can come and meet more than 50 of our top stars. You can play our video game against them. You can get their autograph, hang out at the pool parties with them. It's just really our way of giving back to the fans. The slate from now through the end of the summer is just packed, and I'm really fired up. And, one of the things that I think is important, talk about the success of 196 is just talking about the success of the event in the South Jersey and Philadelphia market. Again, all the bars were packed. It was one of our biggest successful events from a commercial establishment's perspective. I know fans were at the Wild Wings in Mays Landing and Vagabond and all the bars across. And a lot of people still talk about AC as a fight town. And regardless of what you're reading in the press, I promise you this, Mike, AC will rise again.
All right, brother. UFC 196 in the books. At Sholler _UFC. I missed the Sholler holler, but UFC at the end of that probably a little better. He's the vice president of PR for the UFC. It was a great night. All right, pal. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Hey, keep me updated on Byron Maxwell to the Dolphins.